Hi, it's me, Nafith. In here, we'd like to cover ClearPass configuration training. I'm Nafith Salama, and that's my phone number, my details, basically. A bunch of things I would like to cover in this or these series of videos that I will make them as one big video. So the areas that we would like to cover, what's ClearPass basically and why. So basically why we use Radius to start with. That's the first thing we're gonna talk about. Then we'll talk about the essential of AAA, what's AAA, authorization, authentication, authorization, and accounting. We'll talk about roles and enforcement. These are terms we use in ClearPass to take action and base our policy. And we'll talk about how ClearPass works basically based on services. And then one of the key areas in ClearPass, which is ClearPass Guest. We'll talk about also one of the really important topic, wired authentication. Of course, we will talk about in here wireless authentication. Then we will delve onto wired authentication. So someone connects to a switch and we will perform, say, for example, .1x authentication or MAC authentication and so on. And on top of that, we will move on to what's so-called dynamic segmentation, which is basically tunneling of the wired authenticated clients to a mobility controller or to a gateway. Explain all that. Then we'll move on to the applications that come with ClearPass, and specifically we'll talk about two things here. On guard, which to do with the compliance of the machine, and onboard, basically this is a BYOD. They will move on to the admin processing, meaning how would we use ClearPass to enforce TACACS authentication for the admin users for multiple different types of devices. For example, we can enforce TACACS on the wireless controller. We can enforce TACACS on the actual ClearPass itself, right? And then we will touch on the redundancy, the reporting side, inside reporting, which is a feature available that doesn't require a license. And then we'll talk about redundancy, which is basically ClearPass clustering. In here, we'll talk about the first thing. Why do we need ClearPass? Why do we need a radius? So let's take an example. Say an endpoint, say for example, a member for a domain or try to authenticate based on the on-premises, Active Directory, or online Okta, Azure, or some other services. I'll send the authentication request. Maybe this machine is a member of a domain, maybe not, but say a member of a domain. Authentication response happens, no problem whatsoever. Now, this model of authentication is perfectly fine and it works. So the question is, why do we need something else to insert inside and have all these complications? Why radius? Now, sometimes you need to perform or need to take certain actions that are not possible to perform using the backend like Active Directory or maybe an online service, identity service. For example, I might need or might want to limit the time on the network. Maybe I'd like to apply some sort of equality of service. Maybe I want to assign different VLANs. Maybe I would like to have different types, or what if I have different types of IoT devices? They need to have different treatments and so on and so forth. What if I need to take other parameters into account before I authenticate or before I assign resources? Now, the backend will not be able to do that. And that's where the ClearPass comes into play, or the radius come into play. So the main functionality to say, or the broader line, if you like here, any radius, the client or the domain client might send the traffic, the request is not aware of the existence of a radius, it just sent an authentication request. This radius, think about this Lagarde, intercepts or receives the authentication request, double check at the back end, everything is fine, it looks fine, all good. Then the radius will apply based on the policies we configure on them, which will come to this later, and the authentication will work. So basically what we really, in a way, we have achieved a complete control, and that's why we call this one a NAC solution. ClearPass is a NAC solution server, basically. It's a system that will help you identify the users, will help you enforce your policy. You would like to be protected, definitely. I can always monitor the clients, and this is complete cycle. So that is an always continuous process, if you like. If you look into identity or identify, in ClearPass, as a Radius server, I'm able to identify different types of devices. I might give them different treatments based on what type of devices they connect. I'm able to identify the users, what kind of users we have. I'm able to identify location and much more than this. ClearPass will be able to enforce based on the policy that I am able to enforce certain policies, certain actions, certain controls. For example, maybe this is only guest. They would like to only be allowed to go to the internet. Someone who is basically employee, I will allow them to go to internal resources, have full access to my network. And also we will continue to monitor that. And CCTV, I'm allowing them to go to DVR recorder. ClearPass can protect. So if someone tried to impersonate, for example, so we can apply the F logic. If someone tried to impersonate a camera, we will find out. Our policy might say block the user. Someone tried to spoof something. I block the user. I might take certain actions, and maybe some machine are not compliant. Say, for example, they might not be running certain firewall or certain antivirus software, or they might be running applications that are not supposed to be run. Then our Radius ClearPass with the complete system, which we call NAC solution, network access control, is able to take action. In this case, for example, quarantine. ClearPass is the perfect solution. ClearPass, as you can see, this is ClearPass login page. In ClearPass login page, you'll find the main elements here. There are some other elements that are not on the same page. ClearPass Policy Manager, that is the authentication service. ClearPass Guest is, as the name indicates, is for guest access control, including captive portal we will cover later. ClearPass Onboard, which is the BYOD. ClearPass the Insight, which is basically generating reports, and we will cover this one in its own module. So it's a complete solution. ClearPass, we call it ClearPass systems, because think about it, ClearPass by itself has multiple components that come together. The main components of ClearPass is ClearPass CPPM, ClearPass Policy Manager, sometimes we call it Policy Manager. So ClearPass Policy Manager is the Radius component of the solution. Comes with that as additional, application, we call it ClearPass Guest. We also have ClearPass Profiler. So the profiler basically is when you connect, I'm able to identify that machine. I'm profiling that machine. ClearPass, I can do the ClearPass Onboard. That's another component. ClearPass On Guard. This is not the complete. This is the system basically. And these are the main components. There are many more components, and also ClearPass can implement what's so-called edge to cloud security. So we have a complete visibility, a complete control. We can integrate with third party. We can apply certain, if you like, frameworks like zero trust network architecture, firewall as a service, and so on and so forth. Can integrate with third party like mobile admin, mobile device management, Microsoft, say for example, Azure Intune for application control, and so on. I can integrate with multiple different systems. ClearPass can also help us do single sign-on and so on and so forth. So it is a complete control. We call it NAC solution. It's an edge to cloud security. Now we'll talk about the traffic flow. This is just simply to make sure that people understand the button or the traffic, because in the context of Radius, we talk about two types of traffic mainly. The data traffic, the actual data traffic from the users, and the authentication traffic, right? So if you think about it, let's just take an example. So there we go, simplify it. That's a wireless user. There is an authentication traffic. So the user connects to the access point trying to authenticate. Now the access point will send the authentication request to the Radius, which is like in this case ClearPass Policy Manager. That's now the traffic is the authentication traffic, right? So, and then Radius will check with whatever backend, say for example, response as we have seen it before, coming back again. Now, how is that, if you like, pans out from the connectivity perspective? So physically, how things are connected. So that's an AP, let us say, and then this say AP connect to a layer 2 switch, and then the AP, the switch connects to a default gateway. So if the AP, and then the default gateway probably connect to ClearPass policy manager somehow. So that's ClearPass as authentication server. And then ClearPass probably physically connect to a layer 2 switch and so on. And there we go. When the user connects, assume the user in whatever VLAN, say VLAN 100, the authentication traffic, which is this traffic, will flow from the AP, and then it will go to ClearPass, going through all that stuff. So that authentication traffic will reach ClearPass. Authentication happens. This user has now been authenticated. What happens next? Next is the data. So data will need to flow. Assumed, say for example, we have two users. These two users might be in the same VLAN or different VLAN. It doesn't matter. Let's say in different VLANs, and again connect to maybe to the same AP or different AP. That's okay. And then they connect again to the system, and then the authentication again happens in the same way. What if user in VLAN 100 need to communicate something with user in VLAN 200? What happens? This is after both of these users have been authenticated and they are fully able to communicate. So for the data, for example, if this user needs to communicate, say, send an email or something, the flow of the traffic will go just like normal traffic, maybe tagged here, then go to default gateway, do routing or something, and then we'll be able to communicate back to that user and so on and so forth. If they were the same VLAN, let us say this was in VLAN 100 and the other one was in VLAN 100, also at the same time. If they need to communicate, simply just go through the layer 2 communication. Clearly, you can see the green lines or the green traffic or the user data traffic will never touch or never needed to go to ClearPass. And that is the same for all Radius servers. So from that perspective, the authentication traffic is the one that needed to go to Radius, and the data traffic does not need to go to the Radius, and they only flow as need be. Maybe they need to go to the internet or wherever, but that's how the data flows. There's no need for the to communicate with the ClearPass. Now, what does this mean? It means, of course, those who need to be involved in design, they don't need to cater for the data, meaning for the bandwidth calculations on ClearPass itself, when they need to accommodate for how much data and other stuff. ClearPass or the Radius does not have to be in that calculations for the data flow. So now we talk about the AAA model, which is basically authentication, authorization, and account. In very simple term, authentication, I authenticate the user or a device. Then authorization, I authorize them to access certain resources based on the policy, and accounting, I follow up with them. So if you think about it in a high kind of a view, let's think about this one from perspective of our normal day-to-day activity. Assume that someone has a membership in a club. We will authenticate that user. That authentication can be manual, like someone just look at the IDs, or authentication can be swiping the card or iRetina, whatever form of authentication. That's what's so-called authentication. So step number one. User 2 will be also authenticated, but they might have different rights to the system. And that's after authentication, we move to authorization. So the first one might be member for swimming, allowed to go swimming, maybe boxing. Another one maybe golf, maybe tennis. Now that's what's so-called authorization. I authenticate to you. I might only allow you to go certain location or maybe just exercise certain sports, and so on and so forth. That's what's so-called authorization. Accounting now, I know when did you start, when you did end or finish, what time you came and joined the club, and probably what time you entered the club, maybe today, and what time you left. This is what's so-called accounting. Now, these are the three main elements, and we're going to cast these, like these are examples of a day-to-day life in a club. Now, in the case of authorization, for example, we might want to authorize the users, but then we don't have enough attributes. So we will authorize the users what's so-called first level authorization. So now the user logs in, authenticated, we find details in the user account attributes, membership and maybe location and so on, and we will be able to take these or to use the account details, account attributes to be able to authorize the users. But sometimes the account attributes do not have all details that we need for that user to be fully authorized. Example of this one, I might need to have some other resources. We call this one second level authorization. These are the information that are not stored in the account attributes. So things like, is the swimmer wearing suitable swimming trunks, for example? So this is not really in the account attributes. Things like, is that, do they have the correct boxing gloves? And do they have the correct tennis shoes and rackets and so on and so forth? Basically, these information are not stored in the account attributes, which we call it first level authorization. We have to use some sort of additional help from additional sources that we would like to utilize. For example, I might use the time that the user logs in to define how long the user has been into the system. The time information is not stored into the account attributes. I might want to consult some other database to find out. So in summary, network access, we will have the accounts. So we have account details, attributes, username, password, location, department, title, and so on. Once you are authenticated, we will use this authentication. Then once you're authenticated, we will authorize you. But then authentication can get or take different forms or different sources. Username, certificate, and the source of authentication can be ClearPass internal database, can be LDAP servers, can be Active Directory, can be Microsoft cloud-based Entra ID, token servers, and much more. Once I am able to authenticate you, because remember authentication consists of method and sources. So these are the authentication sources, and probably the method depends on the authentication. Is it .1x? Is it guest? Is it MAC authentication? And so on and so forth. Once I'm able to authenticate you, I will authorize you. Again, account information contains details or contains attributes, things like department, location, and so on and so forth. If need be, not always as an option, but that all depends what I'm looking for, I might need to perform second level authorization. We call things like health check on the machine. The machine type, is it Windows, is it Linux, is it Mac, is it something else? Is it a smart device? And then what am I going to do? So this is what's so-called second level authorization, and then I'm able to perform accounting basically, which is the start of the authentication or the start of logging into the system, when you finished, how much bandwidth you utilize, and so on and so forth. I can, based on that, maybe my policy says you are maximum able to consume 1 gigabyte of data and you will be disconnected. So that is possible if we enable accounting in this case. Obviously, that will have to be enabled in different locations. In a nutshell, we have a complete control over the user when they logged into the system. Now, the question comes sometimes, we have people or we have users, so human, it can be he or she or whatever, it can be a machine, it can be an IoT device, something like CCTV camera. We will perform MAC authentication. That's also called users. It might be that the user, they might have one or multiple devices. So what do we authenticate? Do we authenticate the user, or do we look for only devices? Now we talk about the client. So the client is indeed a combination. It can be unique. So the client can only be a device, a hardware, because it's a hardware basically that will perform MAC authentication, things like a printer. That's again can be seen as a user equal client. But the client in a broad sense of definition is a user, most likely human, that might use one or multiple devices. I should be able to apply my policies individually. So the user can be allowed with all their devices, or the users might be allowed with one or two devices, might revoke other devices. Okay. Now that comes, as we said, in one of the source of authentication, as we said, things like Active Directory. Now you think about Microsoft Active Directory or cloud-based, Azure or Intra, the new name. Now, does ClearPass need to join the domain? We might be able to join the domain if need be. So sometimes you might want to join the domain if you are using EPEEP, for example, for authentication, that will be explained in the lab. Now, if we decided to join the domain and we need to join the domain, absolutely, you will be in the administration tab of ClearPass. You go to the server configuration, and then you are going to click on the join the domain. So join domain. That will bring up another page, and you will provide details of the domain. This user account has to be an administrator, which is basically some account that has admin privilege on the domain controller that will allow the ClearPass to join domain. Can ClearPass join multiple domains? The answer is yes. ClearPass is a multi-service system that can join multiple domains. Now this is, you can clearly see once you join the domain, you should get all good message, basically no errors here. Close this, and we can clearly see that specific ClearPass has joined the domain. We could join multiple domains if need be. For example, ClearPass might be serving multiple clients, maybe in business park or in a location where we provide a service to multiple clients, maybe multiple schools, and then each one of those businesses or entities might have their own domain. We can join multiple domains, so not only one domain. ClearPass is a multi-tenant system. Now that is when it comes, or we need to join the domain. Now, when we authenticate, as we said before, the authentication source can be from multiple things, like from Active Directory, Azure, LDAP, and so on. Now, we need to define or add extra source of authentication. We will go to authentication source. We'll pick up whatever authentication type. So in this case, we will pick up as an Active Directory in this case. Then if we decided the Active Directory as an authentication type, which we have said, we give it a name. Now what we see here, the authentication, we say enable to use authentication source to also fetch role. This simply means that you are allowing ClearPass to use attributes when they try to authenticate as a role, right? And we will come back to these. We will use these roles as decision making. Now that's Active Directory. Now with that comes two parameters, server timeout and cache timeout. So what are these two? Simply speaking, if you have multiple servers, then they will try to reach the server if within 10 seconds, after 10 seconds, the server is not reachable from reachability point, like from network reachability, maybe a server down or there's an issue. That server will time out, i.e. the request will time out. They will go to a next server. So if you have multiple servers in ClearPass for the LDAP or Active Directory, they will try them in sequence. The cache timeout, 36,000 seconds, it means 10 hours, 1 hour, 3,600 seconds. This is what happens when you connect. So when ClearPass authenticates with the Active Directory, say, they will download the attributes for that connection. So let's say user 1 or user A, they will have department as an attribute, say membership of a group as an attribute, say title as an attribute. They will cache these values for 10 hours. So they don't have every time when they authenticate to download these attributes. Now that will time out will the cache 10 hours by default is something you can always change the time unless you have a valid reason. Normally we leave it as 10 hours. You can always flush out that, of course, for individual user, but then the attribute like things as I said to you, city, location, department, title, and so on will be kept for 10 hours. After 10 hours, if they authenticate again, they will go and fetch the attributes and they will cache it for another 10 hours and so on. Now that will make it more efficient. The other question is, do they cache the password? The answer is no. So ClearPass will always and always, when they try to authenticate the user, they never ever cache any password. Passwords are not cached. So we added the type, or we selected the type, we give it a name, we leave these as things as they are, and the primary server, we give details of that primary server. You provide details here, so that's a commonly qualified, qualified domain name. Here, the bind, this doesn't have to be full admin. You only need a read only because you are searching here basically. So the bind password and the bind DN, basically you only need to have a read only account on the domain controller, which is in this case the name of this dc1.class.lab. With a bind DN, you can always click on the search DN. This is when you select which part of your domain you are going to fetch the information. It's always recommended you only search a subset if you have really large domain to make it more efficient. So anyway, so here you save it. Once you do this, you might want to select. So now this is in the attribute tab. You will select what you're going to do. So basically, when ClearPass authenticates, these are what's called attributes that can be read or can be returned back from Active Directory. We might select some of these attributes and use them as a role or attributes. So basically, simply, we're going to say, listen, ClearPass, once you receive these back, use these attributes as a role or attributes, meaning I can use them later on in my decision making. Like for example, in the if statement, if that user is a member of equal something, maybe IT, then take this action. So we will inform ClearPass, please, when you get these back, use them as roles or as attributes. Now we can clearly see, once we added the authentication source, we can see it listed as part of the list of authentication sources. Now what we also notice, this is another one has been added also similar to this one. What you have noticed, probably these list of built-in authentication sources, and notice the built-in are in square brackets to denote these are built-in authentication sources. One of the key ones is local user repository, inside guest user, endpoints repository, deny list, multiple, so up to 13. So basically by default we only have 11 in this case.